Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Hey, how are you? Good to know you. You doing all right? Good. Hello again, everybody. I am your host, Todd Rossnagel. I am back from another trip to Lake Charles. It is Sunday, and on Sundays, we worship with or without electricity. That's the focus of today's episode of the Louisiana Now podcast. Welcome in, and thank you so much for joining us. As you know, there's a lot going on in South Louisiana, including the potential landfall of Sally. Sally will be making its way to Louisiana this week, and we will, of course, have much more on that storm as it potentially impacts an area of the state that has not yet been affected by a storm. But for this episode, we wanted to return to the field in Lake Charles yet again, where despite most of the region still not having electricity, several churches worshiped together today, including First United Methodist Church, Lake Charles. In fact, this is just the second time back in the sanctuary since the pandemic limited worship, and the church still does not have electricity. We'll have more with senior pastor there, Weldon, in just a moment. But first, we wanted to head over to Warren United Methodist Church and visit with Reverend Davis Clark, who was holding worship outdoors in the midst of a neighborhood that has been completely devastated. And that's how our conversation began, because for Clark, the devastation reminds him of one storm, Katrina.
As you can see, the devastation is unbelievable. I was in Hurricane Katrina. Does not compare. This is far worse. The only difference is the fact that we don't have that many deaths. But if we would have gotten the surge, we may have been worse than Katrina in that sense. But the damage, this was a pristine neighborhood, and look at it. So we, the church, need to make sure that we come together in a way that has never been looked at before, because this affects all of us, you know. I just want to see the church to be able to be a part of what is going on in order to bring this back, because without the church, I believe God is really sending a message to those of us who understand stuff doesn't just haphazardly happen. You know, there are some things right now that's going on. We got how many systems out in the Atlantic now? 7? Come on.
You were telling me before we began this recording that you were doing well. COVID or not, things were really on an uptick, and we were talking about how you were doing outside church, which we're gathered for here this morning again, and that was working and continues to work.
Yes. It's amazing. And Todd, I want you to really think of it in these terms. This is exactly what God told me to do prior to. It wasn't something, and everybody tried to get me to change. Now, I want you to hear this. From March until this hurricane, we had not succumbed to any weather systems that stopped us from having services out here. People park right here facing the church. I'm standing right there and preach. And there were people coming from all aspects of the community. So we were doing exceptionally well. And it's hard to think of it, but God is trying to show us that there is a newness of how we may need to look at how we worship. So one of the things that has come out of this for Warren is this. And we haven't had time to sit down and talk to all the people because they haven't been here. But we're going to do this at least once a month when we get back to normal, if that's the case.
In some ways, Davis, you were beginning to embrace that church is not about a building, that church is indeed outside in more ways than one.
You could not have said that better. we have succumbed to the building. Now, the building is necessary. Don't get me wrong. But can we contain God in the building?
As I was driving in, and it's hard on a podcast to show people the devastation, but just know that I'm 6'6", and there are piles of debris at every single house that are far taller than me. The devastation here is significant. It's real. Where is God in the midst of that devastation? When you walk this neighborhood, what do you say to folks?
Well, the main thing is God is such an awesome God. There were, I think, 5 or 6 people that died in this storm. We got hit by the baddest storm that ever hit land at 150 miles per hour winds. And the wind itself has not killed anyone. So God saved life so we can begin to see who's in control. We think politically that it's those people in office. They don't have the authority God has. So what we got to do is tighten up our belts. And God said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Now God said, well, you can have them, but they can't be first. Okay? So somewhere along the line, we got to stop acting like God, because we don't see God physically, but the presence is always there. We got to begin to put God where God needs to be.
You speak of the presence of God, and we need to be the hands and feet of God right now here in Lake Charles to do the work to clean up. What would you say to folks who may be listening to this who really have maybe forgotten about Hurricane Laura? I mean, we quickly move on in this country.
Well, the only thing I can tell you, if you really want to know the devastation, you want to get a feel for it, and think about where you are now, you got to come visit here. You got to come see this for yourself so you can go back and tell people, I didn't think it was that bad. But God, this church had 5 or 6 trees to fall. And we have 1 broken window pane.
So 5 trees, rather large trees, around this church fell, and you have 1 broken window pane.
Broken window. And how amazing is that? And again, God is trying to show us, if we just put our trust in God, it says that all things work together for the good. And because of that, guess what? We got to love God. But it starts by finding something to do in this devastation. Show the hand of God, show the Spirit of God, show the integrity and character of God right over here. If you can't help but one person, that's what it's all about.
People are arriving. I know you have to get ready to be the church. So thank you very much for taking time out of your Sunday to talk to us. It's been a pleasure visiting with you.
Thank you, man, because this, for me, is what is necessary for everyone to understand. This is not going to go away in 2 days. It's going to be a while before the people of Lake Charles recover. But with God, all things are possible. Please keep that in mind and in your spirit, because if we've ever needed God, we need him right now.
We're back with more as we head up the road to First United Methodist Church of Lake Charles. But first, a word from our sponsor, the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana. Your United Methodist Foundation stands ready to support the United Methodist Churches of the Louisiana Conference. They've been there through storms of the past, and they're here now for churches that need help. Hurricane Laura was one of the strongest hurricanes on record to ever strike Louisiana. If your church was in its path, you're buying supplies, paying for repairs, and meeting insurance deductibles. It's probably got your church budget cash strapped. Let the foundation help with a no-to-low interest deposit secured loan. No interest for the first 90 days, only 2% interest for 12 months after. The foundation is here to help, and that help is just a phone call away to some friendly folks who know your situation better than anyone. Visit their website today for more information, umf.org. Back now to our show, and I drove up the road to First United Methodist Church of Lake Charles, where, despite no power, the congregation met for just the second time since the pandemic in the sanctuary. We caught up with Reverend Weldon Barres. What did it feel like to gather in this sanctuary this morning to worship?
To me, it was a remarkable experience to have such a good crowd, but just to have anyone to come in the Lord's house and to give thanks to God and to gather together as a people of faith. To me, and I hope to our people, it's a source of strength and encouragement, and something to really help us get through the days to come, which are not going to be easy.
How is it in Lake Charles?
Yeah, it's been devastating. Anyone who drives around Lake Charles and in the surrounding community can just see the complete destruction of so many neighborhoods, trees down all over, power lines. It's like a bomb hit the city. It's like a massive tornado went through the entire community. It has been a destructive storm.
Your message today was brief. You allowed folks to stand up and give thanks for what they're thankful for. That, I think, was the key message today.
I agree. It was a brief message on my part of giving thanks to God, just to kind of lead the way for them to do it. And then several of them, I'd say 12, 15 of them stood up and expressed things that they were thankful to God for. But as I looked upon the congregation, I could see tears in the eyes of nearly everyone as they were thinking of things that they were individually thankful for, and they wanted to show that gratitude to God today.
Where do you see God in the midst of everything, Weldon?
I see God everywhere I look. I see God in the law enforcement officers. I see God in the linemen. I see God in the volunteers who've come through here to help. I see God in the folks coming from other churches to cook meals. I see God in the restoration company that's been working so hard to fix things here at the church. I see God all over the place.
You're sending forth him, "It is well with my soul."
Yeah, based on the classic hymn by Horatio Spafford, where he lost his 4 daughters in that tragic ship accident, and in the midst of his grief, he wrote that hymn over the very spot where the ship sank, saying and affirming that he knew God was with him, and because of that, it's well with my soul. And that's our faith and our confidence during this difficult time in our community, that in the midst of hardship, God's with us and we're going to make it. And because of the presence of the Lord and the help of so many countless people, it'll be okay, and it's well with our soul.
Weldon, thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd, for being with us. That means a lot to us.
One more thing before we leave you today. We want you to meet Putt.
Putman, Puttman.
Putnam has a restoration company and has known Weldon since he was 16 years old. The two connected right after the storm, and Putt went straight to work to help FUMC. But really, when you get to know the backstory, you know that this is a deep spiritual connection.
He took me in as a teenager and spent time with me and taught me, all about music and arts, and just, loved on me as a teenager in the time I needed it most, at awkward ages.
There is something about having those deep connections to a pastor that you never forget, most especially in times of disaster when we come really close to our Maker, right?
So true. And, our relationship's been so deep because the older I get, I realize what Weldon did for me early on and for our community in Spring Hill. And so just this, not even paying him back, but the opportunity to come serve him and his church in time of need is just by far our honor. And, we've been sleeping in the parking lot and sacrificing so much, but it's worth everything to save this church, the organ, all the intricate parts of the sanctuary, and it's just been a labor of love.
There is just so much happening in Southwest Louisiana. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Louisiana Now podcast. We will continue to tell the stories from here with your support. So if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you know and leave us a good review on iTunes, as it really does help get the word out. For our producer, Mary Burley, our sponsor, the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana, I am your host, Todd Rossnagel. May you be reminded yet again that all is well with your soul.